Sister demanded I raise her kids. I blocked her number. Life destroyed her. That's the headline people want, but the truth sat in my chest like a stone for years. I used to tell myself I was strong because I carried everyone through their storms, the babysitting, the bills, the prayers at 3 a.m. But strength is not the same as being a doormat. My name is Brenda, and I am 62 years old. Before I share how they lost everything because of their own entitlement, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe it's time for us to stop carrying everyone else and start protecting our peace. But to understand how they ended up with nothing, we have to go back to the slow, small betrayals that built a life where my kindness was assumed, my exhaustion was ignored, and my boundaries were never even considered. You could have set your watch by my life. Saturday afternoons, I'd be in the kitchen for hours, pots singing soulful steam, the collard greens simmering with a ham hock, cornmeal hugging softly like a warm hand, sweet potato pie cooling on the windowsill. The smells were my offering. My house was the family hub, the safe place where scraped knees found Band-Aids and broken hearts found stew and prayer. Monique had always been the sparkle hair done every Friday, heels that clicked like applause, purses that said she had made it. But the glitter came with holes, missed rent checks, boyfriends who needed money for rent, weekend getaways because I needed to feel alive. Each time she called me, "Sis, can you watch Dante and Keisha this weekend? I have an interview," she'd say. Or, "Brenda, can you slip this to the landlord? I'll get you next week." Next week turned into never. If I count the years, I can name them 22 years of raising her children on top of the children I had raised, 2 decades of birthday cakes iced with my hands for kids who called me auntie, but depended on me like I was their second mother. I paid for uniforms, dance recitals, that emergency orthodontist bill when Monique said she lost her card. I sat through parent-teacher meetings, field days, and scraped knee consolations, all while my own life, the things I had wanted for my later years, kept getting postponed. Sunday dinners were our family ritual. The living room would fill, the church radio hummed in the background sometimes, and there were always extra plates. I remember one Sunday in particular when I had made 3 trays of macaroni and cheese because Monique called at the last minute saying traffic was bad and she would bring some friends. Friends arrived, 2 adults, a baby, and a man who smelled like a packed-on perfume, sitting like he owned the space. I smiled through the polite hell of it all. To keep peace, to keep the family connected, I swallowed small humiliations, the way some people swallow pills, because hurting was useful if it kept others whole. People talk about the strong black woman, and they wear it like armor, but it's also a burden. They expect you to be unwavering, unbreakable, and accessible at all hours. When my sister needed money, they whispered prayer and faith, but no one ever whispered about the woman who carried it. I would tell myself, "Brenda, don't be petty. She needs you." And so I kept giving time, checks, rides, forgiveness. My house became a revolving door. Kids, girlfriends with stories, men who left prints on the couch. I mended clothes, fixed broken toys, knitted tiny scarves for cold nights. I even missed my niece's graduation because I was covering a weekend for Monique's urgent audition in Atlanta. That night I sat on the couch and told myself it was worth it because family matters, but the invisible ledger of my sacrifices grew heavier. My knees ached, my savings dwindled, and the silence of my own unfulfilled dreams It was a Wednesday afternoon. Monique paced in my living room like she owned every inch of it, her latest lipstick fresh and her phone lit with a new man's messages. Dante was at school, Keisha had cheer practice, I had been doing laundry and had a casserole crock warming for dinner. I told her gently that I couldn't keep babysitting every weekend. My voice shook in a way I hadn't let her hear before. "Brenda, you always do this for us," she said, standing too close, fingers drumming on the kitchen counter. "You know I'm trying. Lord, I can't believe you're saying that now." I tried to say it softer. "Monique, I have been doing this for 20-something years. I am tired. I want to rest on my time." Her face changed, not the sorrow I expected. I had braced myself for the hurt, perhaps even the apology. What came out was something sharp, polished to hurt. "Tired? You'd be tired if you had to do anything besides sit and pray all day. You're selfish. You're useless, Brenda. If you aren't going to be family, then who are you?" She didn't scream. She snapped. The words landed like a cold bucket. I remember the cut of them, so casual, so confident, like throwing away a wrapper. She was entitled to my care in her mind, and she felt betrayed that I had broken the supply line. "You don't get to talk to me like that," I said, and it surprised me that I could stand. "I've given you everything. I raised them when you weren't sober. I paid bills. I stayed up through every fever. I am tired." She tossed her head and scoffed. "You think you're a martyr? You act like you're the only one who sacrificed." She folded her arms. "Honestly, Brenda, maybe you are getting old. People change. Maybe you should enjoy being alone." The arrogance in her voice was thinly veiled. It was the voice of someone who believed money and glamour could cover any moral debt. She had a man who took her out shopping on the weekends, and a string of favorite new friends who always wanted to come stay over. She banked on me to smooth the edges. She treated me like a free maid with feelings. I left the room. I sat at the small table in the kitchen and put my head on my hands and felt the betrayal like a bruise. In a corner of my mind, a quiet woman I hadn't heard in years said, "Enough, not vengeance, not spectacle, just enough." Later that night, she called me names in front of her children, accusing me of trying to ruin her life because I didn't want her to have nice things. Keisha's eyes were wide with confusion. Dante looked down at his sneakers. I excused myself and left before more words could break the fragile faces of those kids. The cruelty cut searingly because it was so ordinary. It wasn't a dramatic theft or a violent confrontation. It was the everyday expectation that someone me would always be available. Monique treated my devotion as a resource to be mined. She used my prayers like a talisman, my checkbook like a pad of tickets. She was secure in the belief that I would always intervene. There were other betrayals, too. Once she took a monthly rent check I had mailed for her and cashed it, then lied about it when the landlord called. Another time she signed boxes of Keisha's dental care as mine and called to yell when I asked for reimbursement. She would stand in the church foyer and smile at our neighbors while my back worked overtime to keep things afloat. It was a pattern. Convenience first, gratitude optional. Her arrogance was not always so bold. Sometimes it came wrapped in a laugh. "Oh, Auntie B, come on, it's just a little favor," a dismissive phrase that belittled my exhaustion. It was in the way she scheduled her life around my availability, as if my time were not a finite currency. It was in the way she placed blame on me when plans fell apart. The final betrayal was not one dramatic act that I could file in a police report. It was 1,000 small ones that accumulated until the ledger closed. She closed her ears to the weariness in my voice, then accused me of being petty when I asked for fairness. That night, she left my house in her stiletto heels and turned back to ask, with an almost bored expression, "So who's watching the kids this weekend, then?" As if nothing had been said. When you have given so much, it is easy to be fooled by gratitude. What I had mistaken for love was often just habit and entitlement. She had never learned to stand on her own feet because I had always been there to catch her. The clarity came like dawn. Not quick and jagged, but slow, the way early light fills a room and shows you the dust you've been living with. For once, I looked at my life the way I might look at someone else's. The lost chances, the postponed trips, the unpaid back bills on my dresser. I thought about the quiet in the mornings, the way my hands trembled sometimes when I reached for my tea. I thought about the things I had promised myself I'd do when I was older and capable of enjoying them. I thought about church shoes and dental checkups, and who would pay when the time came. I started to plan in small, secret ways. I stopped answering every late-night emergency text. I began to say no in soft tones that were not a negotiation. When Monique called 2 Fridays in a row asking me to watch her kids because my cousin's friend is in town, I told her, "No, I can't this weekend." She was startled. I heard the surprise in her voice, then anger, then calculation. But the turning point was not a single refusal. It was the moment I packed a suitcase, not for drama, no slammed doors, no tearful speeches. I folded my church dress, my Sunday hat, the small photo of my mother, and tucked in my favorite pair of slippers. I wrote a letter to myself first, a list of things I had given away that were not mine to give, my evenings, my health, my silence. Then I wrote a note to Monique that said simply, "I'm done carrying what you won't." I left that note in an envelope on the kitchen table. When I moved, I did it like a woman who had rehearsed the simplest, most dignified withdrawal. I found a small retirement community not far from the church, with a little porch that faces a maple tree. The place smelled of lemon cleaner and new beginnings. I signed the lease for a sunny one-bedroom that had a little garden space where I could put a small pot of rosemary and a chair for morning tea. I called Ruby, my cousin, and told her I was moving closer to the ladies at church who would check on me. I turned off autopay on that check I had been sending for Monique's landlord and sent it to my own account instead. Then, quietly, I blocked her number. That was the single, small act that shifted everything. It wasn't cruelty, it was a boundary with an edge. I didn't tell the family. I didn't post anything. I folded my life into a carry-on and walked away from the life that had eaten me alive through obligation. The first mornings were strange. I woke up to a quiet that felt almost foreign. There were no small boots lined up by my door, no chewed cereal boxes in the sink, no half-empty thermoses on the counter. I made tea and sat on my little porch with my hands wrapped around the mug. The maple tree made a gentle, private music with its leaves. The breeze carried the smell of someone nearby frying fish on a Saturday, a sound that somehow felt like community rather than demand. People asked me if I felt guilty. I did at first, like a small animal cowering under a table. I missed the kids' laughter and their sticky kisses, but guilt faded into a softer, more durable feeling. Permission. Permission to be small and ordinary without being everyone else's salvation. I paid my bills and made my doctor's appointment. I went to bed before midnight. I bought new church shoes. I started bringing my own casserole to the potluck, not because someone had to feed everyone else, but because I wanted to, because I could. Choosing softness after years of being strong is not weakness. It's a reclamation. It is saying to yourself, you are allowed to rest. That is exactly what I did. I wrote out a budget. I made a list of places I wanted to travel. I signed up for the community choir and began boxing up the things I had hoarded from the life of someone else. I planted rosemary and basil, little acts of care for my own kitchen. This is the quiet revenge. You stop being available when your availability has become exploitation. You draw a line so clear the other person has nowhere to hide behind your kindness anymore. I gave them no dramatic blast, no viral call-out. I gave them the worst kind of punishment for entitled people my absence. You could have called it coincidence if it had been just one thing, but things started to unravel like a poorly knit sweater the moment my support departed. Monique's checks bounced. She missed rent payments because she had been relying on me to bail her out when she needed a little breathing room. Her landlord wasn't the kind of man who left notes. He left notices. Papers started showing up like an overdue chorus, late fees, eviction warnings, a final notice. She would stand in the kitchen Months later, the pleas started. Monique's calls were no longer full of entitlement, but of panic and longing. She left voicemails, short, stilted, then longer and more desperate. She sent messages through mutual friends. She showed up at my church one Sunday with a face made of 1,000,000 apologies, hands folded like a woman begging mercy. But I had learned a new language, gentle, uninterruptible boundaries. When she finally knocked on my door at the retirement community, her makeup smudged, her voice small, my heart gave a little flinch. I had imagined this moment 100 times, the apology, the reconciliation, the cinematic reunion. Instead, it was small and real-fashioned. She stood there, hat in hand, like a woman who had finally recognized she had pushed past the line. "Brenda," she said, Monique, I cut in, my voice calm as the tea I was holding. I had dressed in one of my favorite dresses, simple and clean. "Bless your heart, but I'm done." She stared. The words landed with neutral dignity, not cruelty. "Please, Brenda, the kids need—" "I know the kids need," I said, "but so do you. Running on someone else's grace won't teach you to stand. I can't step in to patch a life that you refuse to build." She tried to argue. She tried to cry. She offered 1,000 promises she had never kept. I listened with a compassion that was like a glass wall, transparent but unbreachable. I told her the truth. I loved them, but love does not mean enabling. "You have to face this," I said. "I will not be the person who makes it possible for you to avoid consequence." If there was anger in her for that decision, she hid it well. Her betrayal had been deep. The apology did not erase it. I am not vengeful by disposition. I am only resolute now. That day I hugged her briefly and meant it, but I also meant the rest of it, the finality. I handed her a card with the number of a reputable social service and said, "Call them. Get help. I will not be your bailout." Later, people in church told me how they watched me at prayer meeting and wondered. The choir said my voice sounded different, lighter, more contained. Ruby brought over pecan pie and said, "Girl, I was so scared for you, but you look like the Brenda I used to know." People noticed the small things. My shoes were polished, my purse not overstuffed with other people's problems. My mornings now are slow in a way that's healing. I sit on the porch with my tea. The maple's leaves gesticulate like someone keeping time. I read novels I had always meant to. I don't wake in the night counting the ways I will be asked to save someone. I call my doctor when I need to. I go to the choir and sing not for anyone else's salvation, but because my throat needs to release sound that is mine. There are afternoons when Monique's absence in my life feels heavy, moments when the guilt visits. But then Keisha will run up and give me a card she made in school, and Dante will wave when we pass at church, and I breathe. They are children. They will survive, and Monique will either rebuild a grown life or not. That's not my burden anymore. My revenge, if you want to call it that, was never cruel. It was the quiet fortress of a woman who refused to be exhausted into invisibility. I traded the role of eternal rescuer for the sweet, ridiculous luxury of a life that is about me for once. I planted a pot of rosemary outside my door and named it Hope. I sit with my tea and a book and listen to the soft sound of life happening without me as the savior. When people ask if I regret it, I think of the pieces I got back, my health, my savings, my time, and I answer honestly, no, not regret, a clean relief. I have relearned to accept help from those who give it without price and to refuse to subsidize other people's neglect. So if you are watching and you carry everyone like I carried them, hear me. It is okay to rest. It is okay to say no. Protecting your peace is not selfish. It is an act of faith that you too deserve to live without being consumed. I sip my tea, pull my cardigan tighter, and watch the sun thread gold through the maple. Life is softer now. There are still hard days, but they are mine, not someone else's. I have a little porch, a bookshelf, and the sound of my own breathing to keep me company. And somewhere, not far away, Monique learned the hard truth. When you treat someone's love like an ATM, you are one call away from finding the account closed. Thank you for spending this time with me. Remember to tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and if this story gave you permission to protect your peace, hit like and subscribe. If I could go back, I would tell my younger self, keep your love, but stop leasing your life to people who will never pay rent on your soul.